Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is XBones with you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is XBones coming to you with another video. Last time we took a look at the equipment that I use for building my model kits and Gundam model kits, and this time we are going to take a look at some techniques that I talked about in the last episode concerning panel washing. So I kind of talked about how I was building a Cross Bones Gundam, and that I was going to be doing it without really doing a full paint job on the Cross Bones Gundam. And just kind of to show you here, we have the manual, and this is the Cross Bones Gundam. Let's see here, version Ka. Okay, pretty typical Gundam manual, as you can see here. You can see all the steps. It's very typical. In the front of the manual, you kind of have, let's see if I can show you here. There we go. Front of the manual, kind of have some information about the Cross Bones Gundam. Sorry about this, folks. It's kind of hard to get the whole manual in the shot here, where I have to place my camera. As you can see, we have some information in the manual about the Cross Bones Gundam. And then the other part that we're going to be concerned about is, if you can see at this last page here, and this is the coloration and the decal chart. So, I'd already gone through the manual. I kind of looked at the runners already in preparation for this video. Today, we're only going to be working on a small portion on the video, just to kind of give you an idea of what types of things we need to look out for. But as you can already see, let's see here, if I can get this thing in focus. Yeah, there we go. So this is the torso, which I already built. Built that yesterday afternoon. As you can see, the whites got a little bit of grayish black color to them. You can see on the neck area I did a panel wash in some steel. The blues, I've done a slight black panel wash. Then the yellow, if you see on the front there, it's not so much yellow now as it is more of a copper kind of dingy color, which is the real thing that I'm trying to go for. And one of the panel washes we're going to be using today is this copper. I'm going to use this copper paint. Let's see if I can get over here and show you. There we go. Let's see if this will focus. Sorry, not copper, but flat brass. Apologize there. So we're going to be using this flat brass. And because this is a pirate Gundam, Cross Bones Gundam, I want to kind of make this almost like a nautical type Gundam. So I'm going to turn a little bit of this yellow, the yellow parts, as you can see here. Today we're going to be building the head. I'm going to show you panel wash for the head. As you can see, the V-fin here, this is going to get kind of a brass type finish. And there isn't a whole lot of yellow parts. I'm going to show you the A runner. This is the A runner, which has all the yellow parts on it, and there's not a whole lot of yellow parts. These are all going to get excuse me, brass finish. And then, of course, you have this yellow piece here, which is kind of a venting. So I did a little bit of gray mixed with some black and gunmetal to kind of get that dirty, grimy look to it, which is more like what I'm looking for. I don't really want a brass finish on that piece. But what we will be doing is some of the parts for the weapons, if I can find it here, later on. Okay, here we go. I look for the runner here. Sorry about that, folks. If you notice here, here's the handle for the pistol, Let's see if I can get close on that there. Is it going to focus on it or not? On the handle for the pistol, you have some pieces, and this handle is much like a traditional cap and ball single shot pirate pistol. Okay, and it also turns into a sword and some other stuff. So you can see on the back of the sword handle, you have this piece, and in the pictures here, in the manual, it shows it being a gray, but we're going to actually paint all this brass because this is the handle for the cutlass. And you saw the effect part here. This is the cutlass, beam cutlass effect part. So we are going to be making this cutlass look very Navy traditional. Okay, and fortunately for us, Gundam are typically blue. I'm sorry, they're not in focus. Blue, white, and yellow, which is United States Navy traditional colors, or blue, white, and gold, and red. And that's your traditional Navy colors. So it's been many navies throughout the world traditional colors, but we're going to be kind of following that color scheme and keeping it with that. Not that I'm doing a United States Navy Crossbone Gundam here, but since I really love those colors, that's what we're going to kind of stick with and keep the nautical theme here for our piratey Crossbone Gundam. So first thing I've already done, as you can see, I got parts here. I'm going to zoom a little bit. Oh, there we go. And I got, there we go. I wanted all the parts in the shot. So these are all the parts that we are going to need for the head unit. Okay, so we're going to be building the head. You have a small little inner frame part for your head off the frame runner. You have your side armor pieces, as long as the top crest piece right here. You have some side vents there, which are very tiny. In fact, you even have this tiny, let me show you here if it will focus in on it, a very tiny skull and crossbone, which is one piece. Now, unlike the chest piece, it is one piece, as you can see there. So you have the skull and crossbone on the chest piece, which I really like. This model kit, the version Ka, gives you the option, instead of putting that on there, to actually do a decal. But everybody has been doing the decal on the version Ka, so I really wanted this one, and I kind of, as you notice, it's got some black and stuff on it. So I wanted to really bring out the accent of the skull itself and make it look like that skull was old and dingy and had been flying around in space for a while. So that's kind of why I did it that way. And then, of course, you got your very traditional V-fin here. And some clear eye parts. And we are going to be painting the eyes. We will not this does not take an LED, but it does have some effect stickers that you put on here for the eyes, but we're not going to be doing that. We're going to actually be painting them. Okay, so one of the first things we want to do is a little bit of prep work. So we have out, let's see here, our hobby knife. As I explained in the last video, I like to use this type of blade. As you can see, it's not a full blade, just at the tip. And so, because of when I shave off nub marks, I don't cut myself. So I'm going to be doing some prep work here. And I'm going to zoom out, sorry. Zoom out so you guys can see kind of what I'm doing. And I'll be talking about things as I'm working here and doing some prep work for these parts. So as you can see, I've cut everything off the runner that I need, and typically that's what I'll do when I get to a section. I'll cut off, instead of cutting one part off at a time, I'll cut multiple parts off at once. Excuse me. I will not cut every part off the model, and then as I work on those parts and I sand the parts down individually, excuse me, I will then do my panel washing. So I'll do my panel washing typically as I go, and that makes for a little bit ease as I do things. So one of the first things I'm going to do, and I'm not going to pour my panel wash just yet, but first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to prep the armor pieces. Okay, this inner piece doesn't really have any nub marks on it. I do have the little chin piece here, and I'm going to show you how I work on those, but we're going to start as long as I don't lose anything. We're going to start with the bigger pieces, which are the head pieces. So first thing you want to do is, as you can see here, we have a few little nub marks on there, and so I'm going to cut those off. And I take my knife, and most people go away like this, which is probably the best thing, being the fact that I'm left-handed. I have a hard time pushing away with my knife, so I do this way, and that's kind of why I use the blade that I use, so I don't cut myself. But some people may say, "Hey, you're doing that wrong. You're gonna hurt yourself. You're gonna cut your hands." But I've been doing this for 30 years, so I'm kind of perfected kind of how I do this. So I'm going to very slightly cut these nub marks off. Another way to cut nub marks off as well, some people will just push away with their knife, like so, push in direction away from you. Or sometimes you'll take, this is where you have your cutting mat, and you'll lay it down and then actually cut down on the nub mark. The problem is with this piece, because some of these spots here where it's going to connect together, it's very hard to put it flat down onto the mat. So I'm just going to kind of go in and I'm going to just very slightly shave off those nub marks. There's a nub mark on the back here. I'm just going to very slightly cut that off as well, making sure I don't dig into the plastic. And I'll go back the other direction. I go in both directions. The reason being is, as you're shaving from one direction, you're going to actually kind of create a ridge at the opposite end of the nub mark, because you're kind of pulling the plastic as well as cutting it, and you want to make sure it's completely flat and then there's no nub mark there. Okay, let's see. Look over the whole thing here real quick. Now, fortunately for us, Bandai model kits are very good at not having flashing. What flashing is a little extra plastic that is not part of the runner or not part of the nub mark. It's when they do the injection molding, and it causes a little bit of very thin plastic at the edge, right on the edges here of the plastic, and that sometimes will interfere when you're building the model kit and you want to cut those little flashing edges off. In fact, I have a very tiny bit of flashing right here. Now, it's very unusual, you'll see, but this is an older kit. It was built in 2006. You almost never see flashing nowadays. In fact, it's near impossible anymore to see flashing, but every once in a while you'll find a little bit of it. Most of the time, instead of me using my knife, I will take my sanding stick. It's got the different sides, and I will use the softest white side for that flashing. So I'm going to go back with this sanding stick. I'm going to touch up those little nub marks. Not so much that the nub marks aren't gone, it's just the fact I want to even up the surface and just make it flat so it's not noticeable. Now, once I panel wash over that, the rest of it will kind of go away. And if there's not much of a mark there, you can just use kind of the polishing side, the gray polishing side, and rub it over the plastic and kind of even out the plastic just a little bit. That's all we're looking to do, is kind of get rid of that little bit of mark there. So, like I said, that's why I like these stick sponges, because they're soft and kind of pliable, yet they have a little bit of rigidness. They're kind of some Teflon with some sponge, and then the sandpaper. So that piece is prepped. I'm going to set it off to the side. Go to the next piece. Now, one thing, if you don't really want to cut off nub marks, you can take a heavier grit sandpaper, which I got over here. This is the gray stuff. This is the thicker stuff, and I can just take and very carefully sand the nub mark off if I do not want to cut. Now, most people will try this just because the fact that some people aren't as good with a knife, they're not as comfortable using the X-Acto knife, and then they'll do that. They'll just kind of sand that down. So I'm going to do this side with it, and I'll show you kind of the fact that it works just the same. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. If you're an old school modeler, you're probably going to be using your hobby knife to fix these nub marks here. But that's kind of up to you. If you're a new school modeler, you haven't been doing this very long, using a little bit of sandpaper or sanding stick is going to do you fine. Now I have a little bit of flashing on this headpiece, so I'm going to kind of take the edge of my knife and just run it flat against it. When I say flat, I'm going to actually take the knife and I'm going to just take it on the edge, and I'm not going to even do it like I'm cutting. I'm just kind of scrape the flashing, and then the flashing will kind of just peel right off because the flashing is so thin. Sorry, not the shot here. I'm going to kind of turn the camera a little bit more towards me because I kind of pulled it back towards myself so I can see what I'm doing. And I forgot that you know, I see what's in the shot. It's hard for me to also watch this camera at the same time. Okay, so I got that little bit of flashing off. I got one nub mark off here. And let's take this other nub mark off. Using sandpaper. So, like I said, I'm trying to give you guys a few little different tips. So if you don't want to do things a certain way, maybe you don't want to even, I would suggest always having a hobby knife, but maybe you just don't want to use it all the time. Maybe you're like me and you're left-handed and you tend to cut more towards yourself, and when you get in these smaller parts, maybe it's just easier to use the sanding paper, and I'll show you that. So then I'm going to take the pink paper, or the slightly lesser coarse grit than this here. I'm going to go over everything just a little bit. It's going to smooth things out just a little bit more. And then, let's see here. I'm going to take the white, go right over it. And the reason I'm going it, oops, dropped it. The reason I'm going over it with all the grits is because I completely removed the nub mark with this. And so I was actually grinding down the nub mark instead of cutting it off. So when you're doing that, you kind of want to use all the sandpaper grits just kind of to get it very even. And then I'm going to take the polisher once again, and I'm going to polish that up. So there we go. That's the second part of the head. Okay. And we got the same here. Now, the only reason we're doing just the head unit today is I didn't want to make this video extremely lengthy and long. We could go for just building the Crossbone Gundam takes a little bit of time being a virgin Ka, and I wanted to kind of cover all kinds of aspects of it, and then finally show you. In fact, I'm not really doing this as a work in progress type of video. I'm just kind of giving some helpful tips. I know there's lots of self-help tips out there. That's part of being part of the YouTube community, is sharing with others kind of your tips. And just because one person has done that, done tips and reviews and everything else, doesn't mean that we all can do that, right? So if you enjoy doing something, go ahead and share your thoughts. It's the crest piece. Okay, so those pieces are done. Now, one thing I want to show you, I want to talk about real quick before we kind of get into building this thing, because I'm going to finish cleaning up the rest of these marks before we panel line real quickly. I'll clean them up off camera, but I want to show you one of these very tiny pieces right here. So we have, as you can see, our skull and crossbones is extremely tiny. So how in the world am I going to sit here and hold this guy in my hand, clean those nub marks off? So this is why we have a very thin tweezers, and I have the tweezers that are kind of self-holding. I would use forceps, but forceps put quite a bit of extra grip on it. Whereas this, forceps you're actually clamping down. I don't want to put too much pressure on this guy, okay? I don't want to put extra pressure that I don't need. So where I'm going to actually grab at, on the back here, there's a little piece that normally will go into, the headpiece once he's all put together. Okay. Actually, look at it here. Where's it at? Sorry. There's one single solitary blue piece that we have here. It's going to actually fit into there. And I'm going to actually glue it, and I'm going to show you that part. It's going to actually go like this and fit into there. Then you're going to have the nice crossbone crest. So I'm going to show you how we're going to sand this off a little bit here. And this does have a slight bit of flashing. Not a big deal, but we're going to take that off using our sander. And because this is such a small piece, I'm going to kind of start with the white and see how that goes. But as you can see, I'm kind of holding it with these tweezers. But white's not enough, so we're going to use the pink. We're not going to use the heavy sandpaper because it's such a tiny piece. And the nub marks aren't much. They're just very slight. If I have to readjust this piece in the tweezers, I can do that. There's a tiny bit of flashing, not much. Just a tiny bit. And we're going to kind of just take off the nub marks there. Okay. Now, before we actually do this, let me prep this other piece here, because what I want to do, normally I would do this all in order, but I want to show you something. I want to show you how we're going to actually glue this on, because one of the first things I want to do is, before I actually panel wash these parts, I'm going to actually glue this piece because it's so tiny I don't ever want to lose it. Plus, I'm never going to take this tiny little crest off of here. So what I do is, when I build my inner frame, these, as you can see for the chest piece, the inner frame is actually kind of, there isn't much there for the inner frame. It's just kind of a tiny little bit of torso piece, and you got these shoulders and then the neck unit. So inner frame is very minimal for Crossbone Gundams for the torso. But I always glue the inner frame together unless they're moving parts. Now, fortunately for the chest piece, there's really no gluing to be done for the inner frame. But then I will glue certain of the armor pieces together. Now, not all of them will I glue together, but this head crossbone piece I glued in. The same thing goes for this piece right here. So as you can see, the skull and the crossbones got glued onto their respective pieces. Now, the rest of this armor will separate, because if I was to ever take it off of the inner frame, I would not want to have all these armor pieces glued together. So I won't glue those together. But as you'll see in a next video, I will show you actually how I glue the inner frame together, because we'll actually talk about a couple of the arm piece and maybe a leg piece, actually gluing the inner frame together. So I'm going to take a second real quick here, because I want to show you how we're going to epoxy these pieces together, and like I did there with the torso. So I'm going to clean up real quick these nub marks. And the blue, it's going to kind of show up a little bit more. So when I actually go to panel wash, I'm going to actually run some of the panel wash off, and I'm going to use it to paint these nub marks. Not much, I would just slightly more subtle. Okay, so cut them out. I'm going to do there, because I will likely cut my hand if I don't do this right. These are some really heavy gate marks. Call them nub marks, but they're also gates. Runner gates is what they're actually called. Okay. Now, once again, I'm going to sand these real quick. Now, if you use the polisher on the colored plastic, normally it'll bring back the color that you may have shaved it. Because when you go down into the plastic, you tend to sometimes lose some of the coloring. Because it's not that this plastic's painted; it's all molded one color. But when you stress mark any piece of plastic, you get white. It will turn to white. And in order to get that out, you want to file it down past the stress mark. Well, the problem is sometimes the stress mark may go pretty deep. It's kind of like bruising a piece of fruit. And now we're going to go back with the polishing part of it. I got to bring it up here a little bit. You can just kind of see. Oops. Wow, and it went flying out of my hands. 1 second, let me, as I pick this up. Unfortunately, it didn't go that far. Okay, here. So tweezers aren't always 100% guarantee that you're gonna not fling parts around. So always be careful. So I got these sanded down. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure I have this going the right way. Unfortunately, you can see here, then where my tweezers are clipped on, that's the top portion of it. So I'm going to actually hold it like this, and then I have this piece here, and I'm going to try to zoom in. I'm going to move some of these other parts out of the way, and I'm going to try to show you here how we're going to actually glue this using our plastic cement, our Testors plastic cement. Okay, so let's zoom in here real quick. As you can see, we're going to focus. Sorry folks, I gotta get this focused here. Okay, there, that's about as best as we're going to do. So I'm going to flip this over face down. I want this, let me see if I can point to it. You see in the video right here, you have on this center portion, you have a little clip type piece. And that's going to actually go into the hole. Maybe that will focus here. Let's see here. Yeah. Actually have a hole inside that portion there. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually put very, very tiny drop on both spots. I'm going to actually first put a tiny, not even a brush mark, just a kind of tiny drip inside the inner portion of this blue piece. And don't worry, you actually kind of want to let this set for a couple of seconds before you actually glue the pieces together. Because what you're doing is you're actually allowing plastic to melt. So then, let's set the blue piece down here. Okay, so I got some glue dropped on that little centerpiece, and on the backing, it's pretty much on the whole back of the. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to spin this piece around. I'm going to actually use this pair of tweezers to actually push this inside like that. Now because these parts are so tiny, I don't really have to push them very hard. I kind of just push it on like I'd be snapping it together. And because both these parts are not heavy, they will stay. Oops, sorry, got it out of the frame there. They will stay. Oh, get out. Zoom out a little bit. This doesn't focus in at super close ranges. There you go. It's on there. I kind of push down on that the little scroll and crossbones. We're going to let it dry just a little bit. Now, on the edge of this side, a little bit is melted, but that's not a big deal, because once this is dry, completely dry, I can take my knife, as long as I haven't coated it or done anything crazy to this already. I can take my knife, I can cut off that one little piece of plastic that melted. Okay, and that's all you have to do. That's why I use a very flat tip knife. Okay, and that's all you have to do there. And then I let this dry before I apply any type of coating to it. Okay, now at this point, I'm going to set up for the next part, which I'm going to assemble this piece here, this headpiece, sorry, and then we will talk about how we are going to actually panel line the head. Okay, so now that we got some of the nub marks cleaned up, and those few little gate marks are cut off and everything, we are ready to put the head together. Now, as you'll see through this, I have already glued a couple of the small pieces on the V-fin. Oops, there we go. Already glued the V-fin on that piece, and I've glued this little red chin piece on. Since it was so tiny, I won't have to deal with it. Now, there are some other pieces I'm going to glue together. For instance, the helmet part itself is going to get all glued together, and this piece here, right now we're going to glue this together because this is the inner frame portion, and then I'll paint that. I'll show you how we're going to paint that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off most of the stuff. I'm going to kind of run a little bit of that glue inside the hole, like that. I'm going to get it on this section right here because that's where the other piece goes. I've kind of already slightly test fitted it. You can see here you got these two pieces, and then I could use the clear cement if I was worried about an LED, like the windowing cement. I'm just going to barely touch this, so I don't want a lot of glue on this. You could technically break these apart if you really wanted to at a later date, but it makes it mostly permanent. So now that I put those on, I wait a couple seconds, and then I put them together. Push those just like that. Then we're going to end up painting the eyes on that. So that part is completed there. Okay, now the next portion we got, actually I think, yep, before we go any farther, I'm going to pull out my applicators, and I'm going to use one of these applicators to paint the eyes. So before we go any farther, and before I actually get this on there, the rest of it together, I want to paint those eyes. Okay, so we're going to go in, and we got, let's see, grab which one I want. A GI Black. Our GI Black. We're actually paint it. We're not going to paint the eyes. So I shook the bottle a little bit, and as you can see, I use what's in the cap for this portion. And I'm going to just take a little bit. And I'm going to just barely put this on the eye portion itself. Now sometimes I would do the eyes two-tone, but I'm not really concerned about that. I'm worried about getting some depth of field. So I almost do it almost like a panel wash, but heavier. Do it in such a way the paint is going to run over the eyes. The eye portions will stick up. Right there. Coat the whole portion of the eye. And there we go. Now I'll let that dry. Just like so. And I'm not worried if it falls over. I'm going to take and lightly cap this. I'm not worried about capping this too much. Just don't want to knock it over, because I will be using that later. And I will put this applicator right here because I will use that in a couple minutes. Okay, so the next portion we want to do is we're going to actually take this little face piece here, and we're going to take this other small mask piece. Let's see what it has to do. It has us take this piece that we just painted, which is fine. We're going to shove that on there. And inside of here is some this little spot where this piece here kind of sits. And this face piece can actually flip up out of the way. So we got that on there. That won't prevent the paint from drying. We have that piece popped on. Now I'm not going to glue that in. I don't want that actually, this face piece actually glued in. Now, you may want to, but some people might actually glue that face in as part of the frame, but I typically don't. I just kind of leave that the way it is. And that can be up to you. If you are going to glue it, I would glue it to the red piece as well, the little red chin piece. Make it a little sturdier. So we're going to get that. Now, the other parts of the head, we have this and we have this. Now, unfortunately, the head armor, if we, let's see here, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but if we actually were to glue the head armor together, let's see here, there's a little plastic part of the gray frame, inner frame, that goes through there. Unlike our friend Formula 91 Gundam, you can't have the helmet portion come off the inner frame. So you're going to have to actually snap it together, and then you're not going to be able to glue. And then as you can see here, this face piece will actually lift up and reveal a portion of the inner stuff right there. Okay. Now, one thing you can do, let me pop this back off here real quickly. Jeez. Main piece you have, if you need to pop this off, you want to pop it from the back. So one thing I noticed, I wish I'd noticed it before, is we're not going to be able to get a good panel wash on the front face if we have the side head armor on. So what we're going to do is very gently pull the head armor off, put that side off, because you got some little details on the side, and I want to be able to get all the details. Granted, you're not going to be able to see it, but I want to be able to get everything. So we're going to pop this back off here. Sorry about that, folks. It's nice to see us filming this stuff live, not editing it. So you get to see all the mistakes we make. Ain't that the wonders of YouTube? Wow. Come on. I want to be careful because I don't want to actually break it. Okay, that portion's off. Okay. So, let me show you how we're going to do our panel wash. So, I'm going to take the glue, I'm going to put it up here. And we're not going to do 2 panel washes. Now, when I do my panel wash, some people will take their paint and put it inside the tin here, but for what we're doing and for the small, minute amount that I'm actually, sorry about that, it gets something out of the way. For the small amount that I'm going to be doing for this, I'm not going to actually be, sorry, I'm not going to be, I'm just going to be using 1 tin filled with a little bit of our wash here. So, let's see here. I'm going to grab my stuff here with my Q-tips, and I'm going to grab one of my fluid bulbs, and I'm going to take a little bit of my paint thinner. I'm going to suck up the paint thinner into the bulb. And I'm going to go right over my little paint tray, paint tin. I'm squeezing all that into there. Okay. And I'm closing my bottle. I've had too many close calls with dumping this stuff. Okay, so I got my tin there. Already got a little bit of paint on my applicator I'm going to be using, as you can let's see here. There we go. Get a change camera position there just a little bit. As you can see, I'm using this tiny applicator. Once again, I'm going to tighten the bottle just a little bit because I'm going to shake this up. I want to use for my washing. Now, a lot of times people will take and put a little bit of your paint in there with another one of these, and I just don't find it's that necessary. I take the cap, and there is some paint inside that cap, so I'm going to actually use what's in the cap. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to kind of rub it around in here a couple times, get a little bit more on that applicator. Okay, and I'm going to take here on portions that I want to wash. I'm going to touch panel wash over the entire thing. Now, stuff that's extremely small like this, one thing you can do is you can kind of take, instead of trying to touch all the lines, you can literally just take your wash and for this I'm going to grab one of my sticks here. As you can see, I got my bamboo clip. It's going to help me just a little bit. Take my panel wash and I'm going to rub it in every single line I can get my hands on. Including a little bit on the chin. Remember, like I said, I was trying to make this not dirty. I'm trying to dirty this guy up, but I wanted to make it look. It's a battle mobile suit. And instead of doing complete total weathering, I do a lot of this stuff. Okay, so as you can see, let's see there. I've now got wash and everything, and I'm going to now flip that up there, that top piece up. And I'm going to run wash underneath that mask spot into all the little crevices. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same applicator, there we go, and I'm going to put it in the paint thinner. I'm going to rub it off right here onto my paper towel. Okay, I'll bring a paper towel in this shot so you can kind of see there a little bit. And I'm going to rub as much of that stuff off, get the excess paint off. And I'm going to take, and one thing you can do, instead of using the Q-tip, you want now, if you only want your enamel wash in the panel lines, you can either use a Q-tip like so, a tiny bit of like this, and rub the excess off, a tiny bit of paint thinner. That's not really the effect I'm going for. I'm not, like I said, I'm going for kind of a dirty look. Almost like a pre-shaded look in some respects. I don't want a lot of wash on there, just a little bit. I definitely want the wash in all the little grooves, but I want it to look like there is a little bit of dirt on his mask. I'm going to kind of, because I don't want to be completely white in color. I want to be a little darker color. You can go back if you have too much wash on there, which I feel I do. I want it to kind of match his armor over here where it's white. The armor doesn't look black, obviously. It's not black in color, it is white in color, but I don't have it in the frame here. The armor is white, but it's got some little tinges of black on it, and that's the kind of the effect I'm going for. This panel wash, same thing. So I will take this and rub it down to get the kind of effect that I want on it. Obviously, you don't want to run too much on it because you still have the eyes to consider that you have underneath. But you don't want to remove all the black paint that's up on the eyes. And there we go. When you let it dry, make sure you let it dry with the mask part up, because what will happen is it will rub off the tiny little lines that are down onto the inner part of the face. So now we're going to let this dry a little bit. Okay. And to do that, I'm going to take this stick and I'm going to kind of put it in one of my boxes. I'm just going to stick that up. Okay, so now now that this thing is dried a little bit, giving it a few seconds, we're going to go ahead and start to put the head pieces on. So let's see here. Sorry if I pop off camera every once in a while. It's not on purpose. It's now, there's a portion on here that has supposed to have some red panel lining. So we knew one of two things. We have a red panel line marker, or sorry, red Gundam marker. I actually can use that. Or, and what I'll do is I'll touch it here first. And I can touch it into the plate, rub the excess off the pen. I can do it this way if I really want to. Just touch it on the line like so, and you can see it ran into there. I can take off the excess. Okay, then I'm going to go back here as well. I'm going to take a separate tin, because this has got red in it. The last thing I really want is this red stuff coming back on here. I gotta clean this guy up a little bit. Not a whole lot. Clean him up a little bit. Put the crest on. Now, these are supposed to be kind of like cuts in the face, so if you want the paint to kind of be run over, let's see here, see that? They don't have to be perfect in those lines, that's kind of up to you, kind of what the effect you want on it. But you're supposed to have some red on these sides. What they're supposed to be is kind of like the Gundam got cut. Like you got cuts on your face, scars on your face. That's what it's supposed to be. So I'm going to kind of put this guy to the side, and we're going to make up a second tin for the rest of our wash. Put the top back on our. We're done with our blue marker, or blue paint. Get our tin over here. I also try to waste as least amount of thinner as possible and least amount of paint as possible during this process. It gets kind of difficult. So take a very flat Q-tip. I'm going to put in the thinner and get as much of it off as possible. And I'm going to rub sideways, not up and down. You say, well, why would you do that? Well, because what happens when you put in panel wash? The wash gets in the cracks in the corners. Okay? It allows for this stuff to catch. So if you kind of just gently rub over it, sideways, you won't take off what's in the cracks. You'll still leave a little bit in the cracks. What you want. Now remember, we're going to re-panel wash this with a little bit of black. So if you got a little bit of, in our case, we have a little bit of red, so we don't want, it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. One thing we're trying to do is get the, when I rub this down here Q-tip, I just don't want so much that it gets inside the panel line. It takes off the whole panel line. And because these Gundam markers are pretty heavy, a little bit. Okay. If you get too much out of the panel line, that's fine. You always go back over it. So now, let's see if you can see. We'll focus. There we go. You got that little bit of red inside that panel line there. Not a whole lot. It's gonna. There we go. There we go. There we focused on it. Yep. And that's the only red panel line we're gonna have for the Gundam kit. So next thing we're gonna do, we still got our we're going to take our applicator. We're going to kind of take this and put this aside because we're not going to use that one now. Get a second applicator. I'm going to grab that here. Okay, there we go. And now, I'm going to be shaking up our black. GI black, we're going to do a slight bit of aligning with that. Or wash, I should say, because we're not really panel lining so much as we're panel washing. And we are, because we are kind of getting this slight dingy color. Get this here. We got the crest we want to get. actually, let's see here, where's my, there we go. I'm going to grab this. We clip on the inside of the head. And like I said, it doesn't matter if we got some red in some spots we didn't really want. Because we're everywhere except for where that red's at. We're going to kind of wash it in our little bit of dingy black mess here. Of course, we're going to go back over everything. Make sure it's not completely black. We don't want it completely black. We just want it just a little bit of dirt. Tinge of space, as we call it. And ultimately what we're doing is we're moving the panel wash into the spaces, or the little, shouldn't say the spaces, but the into the little edges. One second here. Try and get a better grip on this. No, it's not working. There we go. This guy is very hard to hold. There's not any place to grip inside the head. Actually grip it on the outside of the plastic, but we don't really want to do that. So anytime there is a seam, I'm going to get as much paint inside that seam as possible. I'm going to darken up the inside of the seam. Almost like you are pre-shading. It's really what we're doing. It's kind of almost like a form of pre-shading without actually having pre-shade. What we're doing is we're allowing the wash. And don't worry if the wash dries on you. You get to always go back with, if you don't like the amount of paint that's on it after you've covered it completely, you can use just a tiny, tiny bit of your thinner to move the rest of the paint around to kind of where you want it. And I take a little bit of in the top there. Eventually it'll dry. It'll kind of dry out, but you get a little bit more paint. And it's going to flow in the crevices and the cracks. And we dropped it. Fortunately, top had already dried. And this is the problem with doing a piece like this. It's whole. It's really hard to get a grip on any part on the inside of it. It really is. There's nothing really to grab onto there, and you can't really hold it in your hands. But if it falls and you get fingerprints on it, remember, like, this is paint that has been thinned with thinner. Even if you get a mark on it, you can go back over that spot. It's not a big deal. We don't want this black. We kind of want it thin quite a bit. we're just looking for a dirty white. Dirty white. Think about the space. This is how I always tell people. Think about the space shuttle when it comes back to Earth, right? Think about what the whites look like on it. Kind of look dirty, don't they? That's the look we're going for. You're like, yeah, but this isn't making lunar landings and all that stuff. Well, you are correct. Not really. You're not doing that, but then once we clear coat it, now you notice I got a lot of black here on the sides, which is fine. I don't need to take it off, I just need to spread it around a little bit better. Come down here. And there. Looks like we have a crack in the plastic here. If you actually get a crack in the plastic, don't worry about it. That can be taken care of pretty easily. We're almost done here. There we go. We have done. Now, once I let this dry, I don't know if you guys can see it there. We'll focus in on it. Come on. Come on, focus. Oh well. See if I can get that later. I'll show you the crack that we got. It's not, I think it's just a surface crack, not a big deal. But we'll fix it. So the last two things we have to do is we're going to take this piece and this piece is going to get, your V-wing is going to get put into looks like this piece isn't going to stay very well, so guess what? We're going to glue that. Granted, I want to be able to take the armor apart, but I don't think we're going to be able to. So I'm going to take a little bit of our cement. Put a little bit on the inside of our V-fin in as well. Just because I want it all to be permanent. Tiny bit of glue. Put a tiny bit of glue there, but I'll retouch that back up on that crack. I actually put it in the crack and it flowed into the crack. The funny thing is, now it's going to look like a scar. A little bit of that red flowed into the crack. It's okay. Not that big of a deal. Clear coated and everything. They all look cool. So we have that piece on, and then we gotta glue these side pieces on as well. I'm gonna touch these with a little glue. You don't have to. It's kind of completely up to you what you want to do. Wrong side looks like. I don't drop it. Actually, before I do that, I see a tiny bit of flashing on here. Sorry about that. Got a little bit of flashing on her. I got the other side, I forgot to get that side. So it would have been catastrophic. Pop that on. Pop that on there. I'm going to take a tiny bit of cement, and we'll run it right along the crack. Just barely touch the plastic here. I'll run inside that plastic crack and seal it. Okay. So that's it for gluing the head portion. We're going to take back up here. A little bit of problem. We got a little bit of that crack. I'm going to re-dinge up that little spot. Just a little bit. not much, just a tiny bit. Now, the new pieces that I've just added, I'm going to touch those, just barely touch them. Not much. The big thing is you got a couple panel lines there, so you want to make sure you hit the panel lines up for sure. And we want to make it look even with everything else. Just a little bit of dinge, not much. There you go. So now we got our head. The last thing we want to do, we're going to put away our black panel wash. One last thing we're going to do is we're going to clean this little applicator brush real quick. I'm going to keep our head like this. I said we want to keep our head. And you remember how I said we want to take and turn we're going to take our focus in on that. That's our flat brass. And shake it up, and we are going to put that, we're going to actually panel wash it the same way we're doing our black. We're going to dinge up the yellow because we want it to look like it's brass on a boat, a submarine, or a ship. Now, this brass is almost a goldish color. Some ways. One thing I forgot to touch up, I already had the black out, I forgot to do the skull, which I apologize for. I apologize for that, folks. That is my fault. That is my fault. Now, the brass is a little shiny, it's got some sparkly particles in it. Now, like I said before, you could almost, if you really wanted to, instead of use brass, you could almost use a black and make it just look not so yellow. That's kind of up to you, what you want, what kind of color you. What you really want. It's not that I'm trying to re-color everything on here. I just want the V-fin to look a little bit different, not so much yellow. Okay, but I don't want to look dirty and dank like I did with the vents. The vents are going to look kind of almost blackened a little bit, gunmetaled. So one way to do that is you take your yellow and okay. So now that we've done that portion of the head, like I said, we forgot to do one quite important thing, and that is, oh, there we go, this skull and crossbones. So we want the same effect that we got previously on our torso, skull and crossbones. So I'll show you that again here. See, there's our chest skull and crossbones, or our torso skull and crossbones, and I want kind of almost the same effect. I want and I don't, you're like, oh, you should have used a separate applicator because you're going to get some of that brass in there. Like I said, I'm putting it in the top. I'm not that concerned about it. If we get a little bit of it in there, so be it. I'll just add to the color. And the big thing I'm going to do is I want to put some into the sockets, the eye sockets. So I'm going to actually touch those. And I'm going to touch the nose area. And I'm going to touch everywhere. I'm going to touch the blue a little bit because I want to get a little bit of this stuff on the blue. I don't want the sockets to be completely black. I just want them to be kind of lined a little bit. I don't want... kind of just like that. There we go. Now at this point we let our head dry. We clean off our applicators. And I'm going to take and clean these dishes out because these paints I'm not going to... I'll use the black, but I'm going to use the one that had the red in it again. So I'm going to at least clean out that tray. I'm going to start fresh kind of with my... clean out my other applicator. Got the red on it. The nice thing is once these applicators, once you're done with them, once they even if you got a tinge of a color in it, it's not a big deal. Kind of use them for other things. But the nice thing is they're not expensive where you have to keep them and you can't just throw them away. So as you can see, we got our skull and crossbones washed. The helmet, kind of the head unit, helmet unit kind of looks dirty and dingy. We have the two red marks. There we go. The two cuts on the face, we got those with red. We got our skull and crossbones on the head. We got it washed. And of course, we got our brass. Really nice on that V-fin, and it turned out it's starting to look really nice as it dries. So that's it for today, folks. That's just a small portion of this Gundam. and I'll be coming back with you maybe on how we're going to do some of the inner frame, a little portion of it, and then possibly at the end once it's completely built, and you'll get the chance to see the whole thing as a finished product. And remember, folks, if you like this video, go ahead and give us a like. Go ahead and make sure you, if you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below, and make sure you subscribe. And as always, happy Gunpla building out there, folks, and happy gaming.